Greetings, everybody. We are on. We'll give it just a moment for some folks to pop on. I know there's been a lot of excitement building up towards this moment. We've had some great guests on, but having P.G. Sittenfeld on tonight, obviously a very busy individual these days. And so, PG, thank you for taking some time out of your schedule to join us this evening as people start to hop on here.
It sounds weird to say, Derek. First of all, thank you for having me on D Live. I feel like HBO is probably going to option the rights to this show. So those of us that have been early guests can say we got in on the ground floor. But I think it's an awesome thing you're doing, getting to share people's stories more, have a conversation about the future of the city. What I was going to say sounds a little bit weird is Happy Election Day or something like that. A weird election day where most of us aren't even allowed to go to the polls, and election day was supposed to be a month ago. It's not quite like one I've ever experienced before, but will be interesting to see the returns tonight. So happy election day to you and your followers.
Indeed, happy election day, everyone, and good luck to all the candidates who were really kind of thrown into this overtime at the last minute. What that looks like, and obviously issue 7 is something that you and I have been, really invested in, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. Yeah, indeed. And I saw some photos today from the Board of Elections where the cars were lined up down the street. I know the post office has been a little delayed with the ballot, so hopefully everybody got a chance to get their vote in at this critical time.
As a plug, I know we're going to cover a lot of ground in a succinct period of time for folks, but you've been a great advocate over time in ways that not everyone might necessarily know for the value, for the merit of the United States Postal Service.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like thinking about, a COVID and post-COVID world where literally democracy hinges on the ability of a, adequately resourced post office. And, at a time when a lot of people are wanting to gut it. So it's we need a good postal system.
Indeed. And I think one of the bigger pictures here, we'll touch to when we get on talking about the present day of where we're at and where we're going. But I think we've seen things that we've taken for granted, like our folks, our frontline retail workers at Kroger and Walgreens and CVS, postal employees working every day that we kind of take for granted. And now they're the critical employees. And so we both appreciate them, and that's awesome. But, the kind of the theme no, go ahead.
Pay them. Well, I was going to say, let's pay them like they're critical employees.
Exactly.
No one, period, but no one who our ability to feed our families to get to our job should themselves be left in poverty because their wages are so abysmal. So it's a societal project that I hope this has been a bit of a wake-up call around.
Indeed. Certainly, if you and I have anything to say about it, that's how it's going to be. So
Yep.
with that being said, people know you, obviously, if nothing else, for your skyline eating abilities, which are amazing. I don't know how you stay so fit with the amount of skyline that you put away. But, obviously your time on council, other campaigns that you've had, and certainly one of the most visible and active, not only political leaders, but civic leaders, volunteers as well. But one of the things that I think people find very interesting, the feedback that I've gotten on our program is talking to folks not only about what we're doing today and where we're going tomorrow, but kind of how you got here. I relate the story of, I like in movies or a Netflix series when they do the flashback, and all of that's instructive to how we got here today. So can you just share with us a little bit just about your background growing up here in Cincinnati? And I know a lot of people maybe don't realize this. You've been on council since 2011. But before that, you were very active in the community, in the education sector. And so I'd like to myself learn a little bit more about that, if you'd be willing to share.
I'll try and do this adequately, but succinctly too. So, and I'll actually go sort of one step further, because when I think about the place I want Cincinnati to be, I am mindful of kind of my own family's experience and journey here. My parents moved to Cincinnati exactly 50 years ago, and they did not have much money at all. They knew, I think, they kind of knew literally one person, and they didn't necessarily have some long-term vision for, the rest of their lives unfolding here. But I feel like a lot of people, like the generation above them, total strangers, again, not some old Cincinnati family, wrapped their arms around them, helped welcome them, helped kind of get them situated. And I know that, they were fortunate to have that experience. That's not everyone's experience, including the present day. But I do think, how can we make Cincinnati the kind of place where if you're Derek Bauman and you got deep roots and deep cred in Northeast Ohio, but Cincinnati's a new spot, or another guest of D Live, your Councilman Chris Seelbach, and you come to Cincinnati to go to Xavier University, like, we can't afford as a city to not wrap our arms around people and welcome them and, help amplify all of their talent. So my parents ended up, staying here, raising my 3 older sisters who, if you really want some good guests for D Live, my 3 sisters are the impressive ones, but
Indeed.
you'll have to settle tonight. Went to the school where my mom was a teacher, Seven Hills, a small, very good school. Went away for college, got a scholarship for grad school. I know I'm kind of going breathlessly through some of the story. And I feel like this will probably resonate with your arc of your career as a police officer, living in the suburbs, but then making the decision that you wanted to come and be part of this renaissance in Cincinnati.
Right.
I finished graduate school in 2009. And there was this sense that we are, as I still feel today, far from where we want to end up. But I like the trajectory, right? Like, this is a city with possibility and with potential, and that people are excited about. And by the way, some of the challenges that come with living on the coast aren't quite as present in the city of Cincinnati. And in terms of the education work, I was back winter of my second year at grad school. I went to grad school in England, as you can tell from my charming British accent. And I met a woman for the first time named Darlene Kamine. She had been a magistrate in juvenile court. She had pivoted from there to be doing a lot of education work. She was working on this sort of notion of schools as community learning centers, schools as round-the-clock hubs, where instead of a 7:30 to 2:30 school day and then shut down the building, shoo the kids out into the street, really, how could you populate these schools with health centers, with after-school programming, with adult education, with opportunities for immigrant families, and on and on and on. And I went back to England and I sent her an email that was something like, I will carry your purse around. I will be your chauffeur. I just want to work for you because I'm really inspired by what you're doing. And we ended up, she was obviously the clear leader, but I got to be her deputy, founding an organization called the Community Learning Center Institute, where I spent my early years back in Cincinnati, early professional years back in Cincinnati, working in Lower Price Hill at Euler School, working in East Price Hill on a school that ended up not happening, but Quebec Heights was going to be the school, Academy of World Languages in Evanston, really thinking about, and by the way, I think this is one of the things, not to trace everything back to COVID, but one of the dominant themes, I feel like at this moment, appropriately so, is how laid bare the horrific disparities in our society are, right? And part of the whole notion of schools as community learning centers was, it's not just enough to send a kid to school and say, all right, no matter what's happening in your home environment, just go get a great education. Well, if you can't afford eyeglasses, if you are literally in pain because you don't have dental care, and like your teeth are in pain, if you are hungry, so really thinking holistically about what do you need to do to position someone to thrive. That was the early work. And it was, just Derek, as you've been so involved in our neighborhoods in so many ways, including on the west side of the city, it was an incredible way also to be in touch with the neighborhood pastor, the neighborhood business owner, the parent, the advocate at a kind of granular level that did get me thinking earlier than I otherwise might have of, I think I might have something to contribute and be involved on city council too. So.
Right. And, and we could, I think, go on for a long time about this, but I think one of the points that you brought up is something in my kind of finger on the pulse of things in the city of Cincinnati is that, especially in these times now, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about the budget and where we stand, because I don't think that everybody really has a full grasp on the gravity of that situation. Yeah. But this opportunity to work speaking of embracing people and embracing ourselves and our neighborhoods, to work better together just in so many ways. We've had this history of the city versus the suburbs and the city versus the county, and CPS board and city council at odds, and the east side versus and all of this, kind of balkanization that really doesn't serve us well. And I think there's a sense out there that people want to see more of just cooperation, and we can fight like cats and dogs, especially on the national level in politics. But at the end of the day, people want their trash picked up. They want somebody to answer the phone, when they call 911, and these types of things, as well as have some aspirational goals. But perhaps it's easier to achieve those goals if there is a better sense of cooperation amongst all of us, but certainly among the different, political entities and so forth, and getting more leverage and use out of our, like with the community learning centers, the building, you're not just using it 8 hours a day. So we're literally getting more bang for our buck.
We're certainly going to achieve more as a community, especially if we do want to do some aspirational stuff and say not just, oh, we're a little bit better than we used to be. Like, no, we want to kick other cities' asses, right? I don't want to hear, oh, Austin and Nashville and Charlotte. I want Cincinnati to be on the tip of people's tongue, not just because, we're a great city if someone wants to come and visit, but also because we're an equitable city, we're a just city. And you talk about people getting along, literally the motto of our city, I'm sure I'm going to say this wrong, but Junk de Juvent, right? Strength in unity. It's the motto of our community, and something that I think, we'll do better the more we live that out.
So we had a comment here. I think certainly a friend of yours, Patty Coyne Merlin, stopped by to say hi and give Sarah and George a big hug for her. So how are Dr. Sarah and baby George doing these days?
Yeah, look, I want to, obviously, like, so many people are going through hell and back right now. Is an incredibly difficult time. I have shit because, people, when you have a 10-month-old, people are, oh, how's the baby? And even though, we're sort of suffering and slugging through this global pandemic, it's not the worst time to be a 10-month-old, right? Just mostly because you're oblivious to all of it. So, and it's, seeing it through his eyes where, look, to tune into the news, to make gut-wrenching decisions at City Hall, this is a very difficult time, and we're all doing everything we can to get to the other side of it as quickly as we can. But seeing the world through the eyes of a adorable, cheerful 10-month-old baby is a pretty good sort of refresher of, just hope and positivity. So
no, I agree with that. And, just Josie the cat here in my world, and talk about oblivious. She's out on the patio right now, making sure the block's okay. So that's that. But I think there is kind of this. What's that?
I think Cincinnati's most famous cat. Don't tell Seelbach. Don't tell Seelbach I said that.
People stop by and wave. I'm like, hey, they're like, no, we're talking to the cat. She's more popular around here than I am. But, I think there is.
She's gonna get you a good extra reservoir of votes next go around, Eric.
Well, whatever it takes, we're going to make it happen. But, I think there is kind of this renewed sense now. People are kind of retrenching, and, that presents some challenges as well. I think we see increasing, numbers of domestic violence and mental health, and because there's all of these outside stressors that people are at home. But, on the other hand, I think folks are just kind of retrenching a little bit and remembering what's important, and, gathering the family for dinner. We're kind of turning back the clock in that regard. Do you have that same kind of sense of where we're at as a people today, as a society?
Yeah, I do think that they're obviously, like, when a once a century, both a public health and economic tsunami, roils the entire world, including our own community. I think it almost inherently causes people to just, like, hit the pause button, just to be a little bit of reflective of, like, what are the important things that need my focus today? So I think that, but that by the same token, people are going. I spoke to a, like you. One lighthearted moment, I'm going to get back to this, is that everyone's constantly talking about, when do I get my haircut? When do I get my haircut? Derek, you were a man ahead of your time, clearly, right? You knew something the rest of us didn't.
Haven't paid for a haircut since '93.
But look, one of the ways in which I try and, experience our city, support our small businesses, is by getting my haircut at different places. So I called a young Black entrepreneur, a guy named Tony, who runs a barbershop named Classics up in kind of Short Vine area near the University of Cincinnati. And I called him earlier today just to check in. He had not been able to tap the PPP funding, doesn't know based on, understandable health orders, but health orders that are also keeping him from having customers at this time, just the uncertainty
Right.
that was on his shoulders right now. So it's a balancing act between, yeah, I mean, I do think people are getting to probably spend some more time with family and maybe they have a little bit of clarity. But God, the weight that people are carrying around too is, it's something that I think we all need to feel a lot of compassion towards, including, I was on the board of the Free Store Food Bank for maybe 5 years, a good bit of time ago. But folks who, like, no one I think envisions themselves being like, oh yeah, that's going to be me in that food line. But part of the reason, like, we need to make sure we have a lot more robust sort of safety net and philanthropic realm than I think we currently do, is like, things can change fast for any of us. And I don't know, it's hard watching what our community is going through right now.
No, it's super challenging, and this opens up so many. It really lays bare our system, and really how we have underinvested in these things that are if you don't have your health, what nothing else is really important. And and with the economy, how I think we've learned folks that thought they were doing really well, and it turns out that something changes that none of us expected. And
Right.
it just kind of lays bare the lack of any kind of a safety net that we have. But at any rate, speaking of that, one of the things that I really appreciate about you is how. So, for example, you made a phone call today just to check in on a small business owner here in the city. That type of thing. Kind of going out of your way. I noticed on Twitter the other day you kind of posted and there's a lot of serious stuff on there, but a lighthearted moment, just kind of a fun poll. And somebody tweeted back at you and said, I was helping. I think the issue was that they had a friend that was in dire straits and trying to sign up for unemployment and having a challenging time doing that. And so they're like, you're kind of making light. And then the next tweet that you see from the guy is he said, hey, I got a call from PG. He reached out to me on a DM and now is doing everything that he can to help me through this situation. And so I appreciate that. And I think that's one of the cool things about you is you kind of take this negativity and you understand the fears and the concerns that folks have, and then put your office in your own context to work to see how you can help somebody.
I just want to be clear, you and I did not talk about this in advance, but there might be some, and I'm going to offer this up both as like a lesson to myself too. This individual on Twitter who as far as I know, I've never met them in person, and I would say the vast majority of their commentary to me tilts in the negative direction.
Right.
So, like you said, look, amidst like the pain and the struggle and challenge that everyone's going through, you want there to be moments of some lightheartedness and levity, and just like you want people to still smile. So I did a stupid poll of like, as I mentioned, like Sarah's threatening to cut. I hope it's not politically incorrect to call the thing in the back of my neck a rat tail. That's what I've been told.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, well, so mine's getting a little out of control, right? But so I was like, have you guys let a family member cut your hair? Have you been brave enough to cut it yourself? Are you just going shaggy? Clearly, I'm taking the shaggy route. So I do a little poll on that, and as you said, this guy comes back and he's like, "How dare you ask that at a time like this?" And to me, you could have been like, why is this guy teeing off on one tweet? But he mentioned a colleague of his at I think a restaurant that he works at struggling to qualify for unemployment benefits. So it's like there is more than enough trollishness on the internet.
Right.
So the guy had basically like blown me up. My response to him was, hey, if I in my office can assist your colleague in any way. So we talked to the person he was referencing 3 times yesterday, set her up with State Rep Kelly to try and get it. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm always so disciplined as to meet other people's sort of like, snarky trollishness with kindness. But when I'm capable of doing that, it's a better way to go.
Yeah, no, and there is. And I think it's just a sense of, first of all, social media being used a very positive way here to connect with each other and other folks. But there is a toxicity out there, as we know, especially on Twitter. And so you kind of have to sort through that, and it's easy to respond in that way. But that was something that happened the other day. We did not talk about it, but I noted that because the guy actually took the time to respond and say, hey, he reached out to me. So that's pretty cool. So you get a gold star for that.
not to like sink all of our time here talking about the toxicity of the internet, but since Derek is going to be on city council starting in 2021 and has my full support and would be great in that role, once you are in elected office, there's no blocking people. There's no like, because it's considered like a public forum and free speech rights. So you will absorb all all of the snark that goes your way. So enjoy it while it lasts.
Well, I'll tell you what, 26 years as a cop, right? Learn not to take stuff personally in that role. Sometimes you had to, turn your vest around and wear it to the back, but
Right.
so yeah, I'm kind of prepared in that regard. We'll see
I would
what happens.
say you've got just the right skin thickness
I hope it stays that way. Yeah, I just want to, I made note of a couple things here today before we got on here. I know you don't have a ton of time, so I appreciate you sticking with us. But we've kind of talked about where we're at, kind of as the world stands now, and there's just so many unknowns that are putting stress on people, and we'll see, especially as we begin to open up, how that transpires. But let's touch base just on a little bit from the city of Cincinnati perspective. What I'm reading is projected $100 million deficit. We have about a $400 million operating budget. We know 70, give or take 70% of that goes just to police and fire. Another 15% to public services like picking up the trash. Our head count is down in the city over the years. It's gotten to the point, in my opinion, where, we're trying to grow businesses, but there aren't enough folks in building and engineering to get permits done in a timely fashion because we've cut the fat, cut the muscle, and now we're into the bone. Do we really have a good grasp on what this is going to look like? My sense is that folks really haven't got because it really hasn't started to take effect yet. What are we looking at? Where do we stand?
So the truth is no, and I say that because if you think about how fluid this entire situation has been, like go back 2 months, and if you'd ask someone to imagine the world now, you couldn't have it would have been difficult to conjure that in some ways. So to look 2 months forward into what exactly the world will, we can make educated guesses and we should, but including how that translates to the budget, there are unknowns, there's a fluid situation. And that fluidity isn't just how much do we have our public health situation under control? It's also, are there future rounds of the CARES Act where Mitch McConnell feels more enlightened than, let the cities and states that make up our country, let them go bankrupt and things like that. So is there end up being more federal support? Does reopening the economy go as well as we could hope it does, where a lot of businesses that were shut down quickly can come back quickly? So there are unknowns. I wouldn't sugarcoat anything and to say the city's budget, just like people's families' budget, just like nonprofit budgets, business budgets of all the folks I'm talking to, like there is going to be pain and sacrifice. And I wish I could sit here tonight and say, puppies and rainbows and we've got great news. I feel like my responsibility is to inject as much humanity and as much compassion into a difficult situation as possible. So even when we did the furloughs, and we say there wasn't a vote by the city manager. And look, some were going to be necessary, but I think they sped in that direction faster than would have been what I would have proposed. But I was talking to employees who said, look, we understand when, again, this once a century pandemic kind of comes along that like their decisions are going to be made. But it wasn't just what was done. It was also how it was done. People talking about, getting like an email being like, hey, no need to come into work on Monday sort of thing. So I actually went through and probably called, about 100 city employees, almost all of whom I actually didn't know personally, just because I wanted them hearing from someone saying, this is a difficult time we, the city, and you are going through, but you are appreciated, you're valued, you've made great contributions to the city. So I think injecting humanity into that, to the extent, as the city needs to do belt tightening going forward, I think doing it collaboratively with the collective bargaining entities that represent our workers. And I know, you certainly have been a great friend to unions and to workers. So I just think, people understand, especially in crisis situations, that difficult decisions are going to end up getting made, right? This is not a fun time, but it's not just, as I said, it's not just what you do, it's also how you do it. And I think there's a better way to do it.
No, that's good stuff. And so, kind of transitioning from that and talking about the way we do things from the political side, touching back on the fact that today is an election day, and then obviously November can decide the course of our country for the next, I'm saying, half a century, because the Supreme Court is at risk. Maybe
Yep.
one or two appointments coming up in the next 4 years. To me, at that point, if we have a 7-2 conservative court, it almost, in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter who's the policy people on there, because they can just overturn it from the Supreme Court perspective anyway. And I think that's, again, something that not everybody's completely wrapped their heads around. So hopefully that ends up the way that we want it to end up. But what does that look like? I know I had Charmaine McGuffey on the other day, and that was a great interview.
Charmaine, we're very proud of you, and fingers crossed for happy returns tonight.
Indeed. And so, both you and I have supported her in her campaign. But we were talking a little bit about how in this overtime that the current candidates, for what was the March primary and now is tonight, we're having a virtual campaign or election day parties today. What does it look like? Because I saw some kind of just struggling, because we don't know, especially if candidates don't have a strong social media presence to begin with. How do we connect with the voters? We say go to reach the voters where they're at. Well, I'm not knocking on doors and having face-to-face conversations in the midst of a depression. It's hard to raise money, make phone calls, cold calling, and try to raise money. So what is that? And maybe we come back and everything's normal, in some period of time. But what's your sense of what that looks like from a political campaign perspective?
Yeah, look, I don't think it's a good question. It's one that, I have not fully grappled with, so I do not have some brilliant answer. But you are right. Like, the things you traditionally think of, you're probably not doing a field campaign, right? Like, people don't want a stranger knocking on their door right now. It's a challenging moment. And some folks are doing it, but to like call someone and do traditional fundraising. So to me, the biggest thing that come to mind are, look, obviously when you can't congregate and be with people, in person, a digital sort of, compensating with a robust, aggressive digital operation is obviously a big thing. But there are two other things that I actually think, I've always felt like, if you're on city council and you're running for reelection, by far the best thing you can do for your reelection prospects is do your job well. Like, that's a much better scenario than, be crappy at your job, but be really good at a campaign, right? Like, the best thing you can do. So I think, one, if someone was a candidate for office right now and they were not an incumbent for a seat, I think like tangible acts of helping other people get through this pandemic situation. So maybe that's finding seniors in your neighborhood and offering to take them groceries, right? Maybe it's doing delivery of medications or whatnot. I mean, there are just so many concrete ways of helping. And I think that like that's the thing to do right now isn't, sort of campaign, it's help people get through this. Right. The other thing that I think, and part of why, Derek, I mean, people don't fully know, our relationship has kind of had some like twists and turns along the way. It's been a healthy and tight knit one for a long time, but Derek and I had some policy disagreements early. But one thing I really like
iron
about
sharpens iron, as your former council compadre used to say. Iron sharpens iron, right?
Iron sharpens iron. No, but the compliment I was going to pay is, I think you are like a very serious thinker about cities and about problem solving and about just like how these pieces work and fit together. So the one other thing that I would do if I was, advice I would give to a candidate right now is, rather than sort of talking to people about politics, I would be talking to them about what is this all like? What is our world and our city? And if you're running for school board, what's K through 12 education look like? If you're running for state rep, like what's the future of unemployment, the safety net look like? Of talking about the substance of governance and the problems that can be solved, more than sort of like the politics. Just because, again, and I'm not saying like there's no room for politics and then we're not going to snap back to more traditional campaigning. But I think right now the two things you can do are help people and help think through in a substantive way, like what's the compelling vision for the future and where we're headed.
No, I think that's a great point. It really kind of set me to thinking that I've gotten that feedback or heard about it, certainly in the 2017 campaign. where folks said, hey, I appreciate that the first time you're showing up here in this neighborhood isn't when you're trying to run for some office,
Right.
that you're actually out there and doing this stuff. And that comes first, and not think about, well, how, now that I'm running for office, what can I do to make it look like I'm doing something? No, it's actually much more organic and authentic if you're doing the work in the community first, and then that leads you as a continued next step in this role of public service.
Well, it's another, not that you and I are here to give tutorials to future candidates, but it actually raises another really important point. It's that, like, when you take the leap of faith and do this scary thing of putting yourself out there, putting your name on the ballot, it can't just be you. Like, you need to roll with your army. And people don't just want, I mean, of course, people fall in love with candidates and are inspired by candidates. But if they, instead of just knowing PG the candidate, Derek the candidate, they also know the person,
Right.
like, that's who people want to go to war with, and who, will kind of be their ride or die. So yeah, I mean, forging those relationships is huge. The one thing we should also say, though, is, like, let's not skip over the digital component of this. If someone is, look, my dad is not a digital native. He is not, like, he's not on Facebook, which is probably a good thing. But, like, if somebody was thinking, like, oh, I'm going to run for this office, but I'm just going to bootstrap it, and I'm not even on Twitter, I'm not on Instagram, probably need to rethink that strategy. I mean, it's just like, when people can't be together in person, where are we? We're online.
Right. Well, it's just another way of connecting these days, and so there are a lot of challenges in that regard. My dad, as a matter of fact, Rev Ron, is just has just now gotten on Facebook. He's tuned in here tonight. So he was super excited about seeing you and hearing you speak all the way from Northeast Ohio. So Rev Ron keeps his finger on the pulse from up there at 80, about to be 81 years old, sharp as a tack.
I know he is a very proud papa. And the other clear advice to anyone is, call your talent agent now and have them work on getting your booking on D Live. Like, the queue is long.
Hey, it's tough. We're booked out. We're booked out for a week and a half.
Don't slack on that. You were going to have George Clooney on, right? And then, like, I bumped him, right?
Well, I mean, you're almost as good looking as George Clooney. So, so there's that.
My wife doesn't think so. And speaking of bad judgment, the one of the texts I got since we've been on, which Derek, you need to give me this advice. They were like, PG, you need to get yourself an LED, like, ring light. So for everyone who I look like I'm, like, in the catacombs down here, I'll have better lighting next time.
Well, it's all good. I mean, that's part of I think that's part of the attraction here. This isn't some slick operation. It's just a couple of guys talking and everybody else joining in. So, with that being said, we will try to work on our production quality going forward, but we don't want it to be overproduced. This is real stuff here, salt of the earth. But anyway, hey, look, we're coming up on the end of our time here, so I really appreciate you taking this time out. I know council's supposed to be a part-time job. It's probably a double-time job. It's 24/7 almost. You've got the family there, so really appreciate you taking the time out tonight.
One thing on that I've always thought, again, is, like, I just want to be, very blunt about this. Like, I think Derek, has been and will be a great leader for our city, including in the context of city council. But it's like, in what other universe would anybody be dismissive of a job where you help oversee a $1.5 billion budget, 6,000 city employees, and make laws that govern it's just like, when people are like, oh, this, I mean, it's like, it is a big responsibility. And you're right, the hours sometimes add up tremendously. We are in, if you'd ever told me that we were going to be in a situation where we, the city, were participating in turning rec centers into makeshift hospitals for people in our homeless community who have gotten COVID, or turning our convention center, which you want bustling with, pure romance conferences and whatnot, would be turning that into a makeshift overflow hospital and facing the deficits we're facing. So, I mean, these are just, I mean, unless anyone was alive in 1918, which is probably, no one watching this broadcast right now, or maybe almost any people on Earth, this is an unprecedented situation, but we will get through it. There have been so many heartening stories that have made me feel better and feel encouraged along the way. Derek, thank you for convening your community in this way. And I would just say to folks who, again, if I was responsive to somebody that wasn't even that nice to me, trying to help their friend get unemployment benefits, if there are specific things we can be doing to help someone, reach out to me at the office. I have a killer team. My office email is pg.sittenfeld@cincinnati-oh.gov. Or Derek knows how to find me. When Derek puts the bat symbol in the sky, I come running. So.
No, that's awesome, and and those are great words. So the one encouraging thing I think that we all can focus on right now is that we do have good and caring people here across the city of Cincinnati in all 52 neighborhoods, and a lot of leaders such as yourself, PG. And I appreciate the kind words and your support. And I want you to know that I endorse you for any future office that you may run for. It's the absolute worst kept secret in Cincinnati. But there will definitely be brighter times ahead.
We'll save that for another D Live episode.
All right, I want the scoop, man.
I might given your skill, and I might have, before Sarah just like goes to town with me on the scissors, I might have her give you a call for just, so she proceeds gently.
All right, yeah, I've got all the tips and tricks in that regard. So PG, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll be in touch soon. And thank you for all your hard work at these difficult and challenging times.
Yeah, stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. Be in touch, and we'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Cincinnati, as always, love you, and peace. Have a great night, everybody.